So you wanted to talk about a couple particular things today that I'm also pretty passionate about. The first of which was with regard to abortion and its relationship with our culture, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So would you like to outline your position?
Yeah, sure. My position basically boils down pretty simply to pro-choice as a service, but not as culture. Um, this discussion, I feel, a bit has been kind of beaten to death, but definitely down to sort of unravel any sort of minor differences between our positions, because at least as far as I'm aware, there's large overlap between what we believe.
Sure. I've never actually heard the term. I've heard of like abortion as a service or pro-choice as a service, but never like I guess the way you're framing it. So can you unwrap that?
Yeah, sure. Like in regards to the culture part or the service part.
The service part.
So an analogy that might be given a condition, this analogy could maybe explain it kind of well. Um, Guns are kind of like a service in the sense that you are able to purchase a gun, and the general consensus, and currently, at least in the United States, it is legal to own a firearm. Um, Whereas the moral arbitration on the usage of a gun kind of occurs afterwards. And I believe a structure that is maybe not identical to this, because there's with gun ownership and gun usage, there's some differences that are pretty critical, but I believe sort of a similar type of separation should also be considered for abortion.
Hmm. So I guess I guess when it comes to abortion, I'm pretty close to pro-life. I'm not. I wouldn't go so far as to call myself a pro-lifer because I guess for the same reason that I would always advise people against calling themselves pro-choice. The implication there with pro-life is that you are against abortion in any and all circumstances. The implication that's carried when you say you're pro-choice is that you're in favor of choice in any and all circumstances. I think, as much as I'm not a fan of the Clintons or the way the Clintons, you know, uh, go about their business, one thing that I've always agreed with is the notion that abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. I don't think that they're virtually ever, well, maybe that's not the right word. I think they're extremely rarely justifiable. In the cases in which they're justifiable, I don't think it would be reasonable or moral to prevent them from happening. So the idea that there's such a thing as a standalone abortion clinic, in my mind, is horrifying,
Mm-hmm.
evil even. A place where people can go to consult uh, under the guise of being a place for family planning, whether or not they should get an abortion, is just a nightmare as far as I'm concerned. The idea that pro-choice is a service is abhorrent to me.
So I guess if we were to kind of delve into the morals of this, and I apologize if this has been already repeated a lot of times. I'm pretty sure there's a bunch of existing material on sort of the two positions. So feel free to just like tell me to skip over stuff if it's like too boring or something like this.
Sure.
But I think like fundamentally speaking, when it comes to like the morals on abortions, it's essentially about like where to assign agency or like human consideration. Um, would you agree with that?
No.
Oh, you don't? Okay.
No, I think that's a reasonable position. It's one that I think if we as a society had come to a place where uh, we had the ability to actually to take the time and sit down and come to some sort of nuanced understanding, then I would agree with you. But I don't think that is the case, and I don't think that will be the case within our lifetimes. So just being pragmatic, I don't think that line of argumentation is going to move the kind of societal position.
Sure, then could you maybe suggest, or if you have an idea for how you would want to move the societal sentiment on abortion, how would you go about attacking if not from the sort of perspective of um, when should something be considered human, and
Hmm.
and thus of course be not killable if they've done nothing wrong.
So I think you say something like really important there. You say not killable. I do believe it is killing. I do believe it is a killing at any point during the gestation or during the development or whatever the terminology anyone wants to use. I wouldn't go so far as to say that uh, it, at the moment of insemination we have life. Although I could respect someone that takes that position. I could also respect the position that a zygote is not a life, but I think that I think we'll never actually be able to come to any sort of definitive understanding of that because I don't think there is a black and white answer to it. I don't think there ever will be. And I think that it really comes down to the circumstances under which the pregnancy has occurred. And the idea that we have Plan B, for example, you can just take a pill and flush things out. I actually don't have any problem with that at all. I see why people do, and again, this is kind of why I don't call myself pro-life. I think the implication with pro-life is that something like Plan B is murder. I think abortion is objectively murder, and I don't think anybody doesn't doesn't think it's not a killing. So whether it's murder or not, there's nuance, obviously. Um,
So if you
the
like
way
scratch your skin, do you consider that like murder of like the cells on your arm or something?
I don't believe if I scratch the cells of my skin off that they won't come back. There won't be new cells underneath that come and take its place. Those cells are going to flake off and die anyway.
So is the because so what I'm trying to tease out here is basically, are you? It sounded like you said two things that one of which seems like you're focusing on when a killing is like moral. And
Hmm.
in this sense, I think it is similar to the existing sort of arguments that have been made about at what point in time do you assign like human consideration. And if you want to go down that route, I'm happy to go down that route. The other thing that you're kind of saying, it sounds like, is that um, regardless, it is going to be murder, and
Regardless, it's going to be killing.
it's going to be killing. Yeah, sure, but in the same way that um, definitionally, anything that's at least one cell is alive. So if you kill that, it's also a killing.
It's
Um,
alive, but it's not a life.
so what's the distinction there? I guess.
I guess that it's not its own entity. It requires the organism in order to function, in order to do its thing. It's
So
not
in,
self-sustaining.
so through that perspective, why would it be moral to kill like a cow then?
It wouldn't be.
I see. So are you actually like vegetarian, I guess?
I'm not a vegetarian. I'm also not someone who expects that moral consideration of myself or others. I do believe that it is immoral to kill sentient creatures. I don't believe that cows are sentient.
Okay, so
Um,
okay, I see. So the key thing here is sentience.
mhm.
Um, I guess the immediate follow up is like zygotes or early stage fetuses aren't sentient.
Agreed. Yeah.
So would you then grant moral like okay to killing like an early stage zygote or early stage fetus or a zygote?
I would not advocate for it, but I also would not advocate against it. I have
Gotcha.
a very neutral stance on that.
I see. Okay. Yeah. That's like pretty much the same as I think. The interesting thing I think that you said, this is something that I thought of yesterday. You mentioned that you think abortion should really be considered like per situation. Is that like an accurate, maybe like retelling of what you said earlier?
That's not necessarily inaccurate, but the situations in which I think it is to be considered are very limited. I think that uh, so autonomy is a really big deal to me. I think it's probably one of my highest order values. I think that if the reason you are pregnant and therefore the reason you want to abort your pregnancy is because of something that happened outside of your control, and I mean this literally outside of your control, not such that you know you made a bad decision. I think that if a woman is raped and becomes pregnant as a result of that, she did not choose to become pregnant. Uh, she did not willingly become pregnant. Then I do believe it's within her rights. I mean, it literally is obviously within her rights in America right now. But I believe that that there is no moral uh, way to deny her the ability to have an abortion.
Okay, I see. So, what would happen if, say, for example, a couple was engaging in safe sex and
Hmm.
like the condom broke?
Then that's a risk they were taking.
In that
They
situation,
chose to engage in that.
sure, but in that situation, would you grant like the moral okay for the that couple to pursue an abortion?
Absolutely not. This is black and white to me. No, absolutely not.
So, where I guess the thing that I'm trying to get at here is like you said, as long as it's not in their control. So in this
Hmm.
situation, the accident occurs outside of either of the two engaged in the sexual intercourse's like control. So why would you distinguish this type of um, what I would say is lack of control with the other case, which is you know like a clearly the woman has no like responsibility in that situation.
Right. They chose to engage in reproductive activity. They took a step to sort of ameliorate the risk of creating uh, a new life as a result of that, but they did so knowing that there is a some odd percentage chance of that mitigation failing them, and they unless they're doing everything you're supposed to do in order to make sure that they're maximizing the utility of the condom, not doing other things surrounding the usage of the condom that would compromise its capacity to do its job, et cetera, et cetera. If they're doing everything perfect, there's still a percentage chance of that failing. And
Mm-hmm.
you go into it knowing that, or I guess in your perfect scenario, go into it oblivious to that fact, but nonetheless uh, engaging in the reproductive behavior.
So here's like the follow up. Suppose for those two people, and I think this is something that isn't like too pragmatically unrealistic. Um, I think many normal people or like real people, they'll go into what's the word like casual sex um, without the intention of having a child. They go into that with the expectation that the condom is going to function properly. And I don't think that the risks involved with, say, for example, a condom breaking, assuming that they use it like correctly, that like why would you attribute the responsibility of making sure that function works correctly to the people using the condom as opposed to, say, for example, like a third party like the company that like makes the condom, sorry.
So I guess there's a number of things there. First and foremost, I don't believe there is such a thing as casual sex. I believe that term is the term accounts for a lot of the issue here
Hmm.
as far as I'm concerned. I think that the notion of casual sex, the notion that you can casually engage in reproductive behavior, is that's a part of I guess what I would consider to be like America's abortion culture. We want to be able to have what we want on demand, and we want to be able uh, uh, to what's it called when you throw something out of an airlock? We want to be able to
Eject.
expel things. There you go. Like eject or expel something on demand as well. If I want something now, I'm gonna do my best to get it now. And if I'm a capitalist inventor, and there's something that people want now that they can't have now, I'm gonna find a way to make it happen, and I'm gonna become a billionaire. I think it's all a part of people wanting what they want when they want it. And I think to a great degree, that's partly responsible for like why America has been as successful as a project as it has been. And I think it's a big part of why humanity has advanced to the point we have in terms of science and culture. But I think that there's negative aspects of that as well that have to be mitigated. And I think this is one of them. I think the idea that we can sleep with whoever we want, whenever we want, with little or no potential for consequence, it's just a lie. And I think that this is just a perfect example of that.
So in your like ideal universe, would it be the case that like condoms essentially don't need to exist? Like nobody would ever use a condom.
I think people have to be free to make mistakes and learn things themselves the
I
hard
mean, like
way.
in like the hypothetical universe where all sex is not casual, like at least by this definition of casual, because it sounds like what you're saying is that if you totally remove um, sex that's not like explicitly for the purpose of reproduction,
Hmm.
you essentially like the invention of condoms is essentially useless, right?
So I'm not suggesting that people should not be free to make mistakes. I'm not suggesting that people shouldn't be free to engage in this theoretically non-productive sex.
Hmm.
I believe that I believe that in order to arrive to the conclusions that I have arrived to, you almost necessarily have to have learned the hard way that things don't always go the way you want them to. Things, the thing on the back of the box telling you how great it's going to be is not ever true. This is marketing. We've been sold a lot of lies and a lot of different avenues of life for a long time, and we always will be. And you have to critically think in order to navigate your way through our societies. And I think as annoying as that is, as inconsistent as that makes a lot of my positions appear to be, I don't believe they're inconsistent at all. I believe that what I want to do and what I'm advocating for is push society in a direction where people just think a little bit more about the nuance, think a little bit more about what exists in the margins, and do their best to make better decisions for themselves.
Gotcha. I so there's like kind of two. There's kind of like two things that I feel like might be bad faith to ask you, because there
Sure.
are plenty like so for the first thing, and not trying to like do a gotcha here, but like there are plenty of things that have say less than like a 2% or 1% chance of failure. It sounds like what you're saying is like for all of these things, uh, the responsibility is on the person and not, for example, like the people who develop the technology or just random circumstance or anything like this. It sounds like you're saying, say for example, medication. There's tons of stuff in science, like let's see, I don't know, certain chemicals working certain ways. There are just a huge amount of things where the like probability of failure is like very small and similar, I would say, to the failure rate of condoms.
Mm-hmm.
And I, I feel like it'd be really hard for me to attribute, say, for example, let's say like you have health insurance, right? And the health insurance goes, in order for us to pay you out for, say, for example, some surgery you're in need of, it's your responsibility to make sure that you take the medication. But let's say I take the medication and the medication is like 99.99% effective. Why would I attribute responsibility to that person? Like the insurance company would be like, oh, we actually can't pay you for the surgery that you need because you knew going into like taking that medication, this risk of failure existed. Like I feel like there's a parallel that can be drawn there. And I'd like to ask you that part. The other thing I'd say is...
Let me answer that first, actually, because
Okay.
there's a lot there. So I think that go, and that's a fair question. And I think that my position on this is I think it's almost inarguable, to be honest with you. I think that you go into that thing with a 99.9% chance, knowing that 1 out of 1,000 people will not have the desired result and may have the worst possible result happen to them as a consequence of taking that risk. I do believe that 0.1% is a risk that you're taking. And if they tell you on the box that there's a 0.1% chance of this thing happening, you have to say to yourself, is it worth the 1 in 1,000 risk to me to engage in this behavior, to do this thing? Because if 1,000,000 people take it and there's a 1 in 1,000 chance, you're a math guy, how many people are going to have the bad thing happen to them?
Or are you asking me like 1 in 1,000? And there's a
Right.
million people that take it, it's going to be 1,000.
Exactly. So am I willing to take the risk of being one of those 1,000 people?
So this is actually not what I'm asking. I'm asking you, like, would it be fair for the insurance company to say you knew the risk going into this, that taking this medication would have a like 1 in 1,000 chance of failing, and because of that, we are not liable for like covering your surgery because like this surgery, you're the 1 in 1,000. Like, I'm sorry, like we paid for
I
the
think the insurance
medication,
company
but
should
you knew the risk.
outline. I think the insurance company should, and maybe they do. I don't carry health insurance. I think it's immoral. But I think that if the insurance company outlines that they will not be responsible for covering things like that, and then they don't, I think that's perfectly reasonable.
Oh, okay. If that's the case, then like sure. Um, I would personally feel that that's not very reasonable because the like expectation is so in favor of um, like it feels like you are making a responsible decision by doing that gamble, and that in there's most things in life I think are probabilistic, and for me, like personally, or for the agent that's like operating on the like much more expected side to be held responsible for every like possible error, to me I feel like is too extreme.
Well, I
But
don't
if
disagree at all that that my point is that you have to take responsibility for your actions because no one else can.
yeah,
And
exactly.
society shouldn't have to bear the burden of every mistake that people make, because every time you do that, what you're really doing is taking that consequence and spreading it across everyone else, right? Like, I mean, taxes are a perfect example of this, and welfare programs and things like this. There's a certain amount that I think is like just no brainer. You just do it. You just take care of people. You just pay your taxes. You just there's a bare minimum threshold that I think has to be hit, but I think there's also a maximum threshold, and it's a lot harder to suss out where the maximum threshold is. So the best thing that I think we can do is one at a time identify, whether this thing is worth the risk or not, whether this thing is worth the risk or not, because they're necessarily, and I think you probably agree that there's a point at which we've spread out all these things to the point where the burden on the average person for things other people are doing is too high.
So I would say that that's not super in line with like where I'm trying to go, I guess, in the sense that, or I'm trying not to say like that's not relevant because I understand why like the way that you're trying to make it relevant. But I like like a counter situation that would make that irrelevant is like abortion is just done privately. So the individuals that are engaging in abortion would pay for their own abortions. And in that case, like the effect is really only distributed, I guess, between the couples that are involved, or the couple that is involved, and the potential like moral consideration for the developing fetus. The other thing I was going to say, the second point that I was going to raise up was it sounds like between our positions, the key thing is like where you would say responsible like behavior, like where would you draw the line for responsible behavior? In the case for, I think in your case, and correct me if I'm wrong here, you're drawing the line for responsible behavior as like almost like almost like at the causal stage, right? And for me, I'm drawing the line for responsible behavior in consideration for both the cause and the effect. Like I think, like, again, like I said previously, I feel it's too strict to almost like an unsensible degree if I try to apply this universally, where the agent or the actor is held responsible for every like potential just like negative case, these like little slim negative cases, and that liability is like kind of that person's, that like that individual person's like is placed on that individual person.
Well, let me make sure I understand what you're saying. Are you saying that, well, let's say condoms are 99.9% effective, and a million people use X brand condom, and 1,000 of those people, as a consequence of using X brand condom, end up being inseminated. Now, obviously, not all 1,000 of the people who have the condoms break or whatever are going to wind up inseminated. Let's say that it's 20%. So we wind up with 200 people being inseminated and becoming pregnant. Are you saying that those 200 people have some sort of argument against the condom company? Like they
No,
should
I'm
be
saying
able
that
to...
So I'm saying the second part is, yes, I agree. I think that they should be, I think their situation should be considered for being able to morally have an abortion. But
So you're basically saying abortion can be, in this case, morally used as a contraceptive.
no, it's, in this case, it wouldn't be a contraceptive, because I believe contraceptive is supposed to occur like, the consideration for a contraceptive should be occurring like before, right?
Okay, so what term would you use to describe like why the abortion is being used here? If it's not a contraceptive, what is it?
Like, sorry, like it's an abortion.
Right. But
maybe
so,
I'm like not clear on maybe could you explain like what you're trying to like make more clear?
Yeah, I'm obviously not being literal, but what I'm saying is, like, this is, I'm not trying to dog whistle or anything, but the pro-life people would say that this is abortion as a contraceptive, and I think, although it is not literally the case, I think that is effectively what is happening here. I think that if the reason you're able to justify this abortion is because their contraceptive failed, then I believe that you're using this as sort of a backstop.
Well, no. So the reason why I'm distinguishing like a contraceptive is something that you use beforehand, or it's the consideration for contraception is done beforehand, is because specifically, and I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier, is like the line that we're drawing for where responsibility should be placed is different. And if you like, so for your line, and I guess also the pro-life line, is that the consideration should be drawn at like the cause. Any sort of act that you engage in that like regardless of say like the balance of the probabilities, and balance might be the wrong word, but like the ratio of like the positive and negative on the probabilities, right, like that is still your responsibility. And for me, what I'm saying is, because in this hypothetical where, say, for example, the condom breaks, the
You're
probability is
saying the
so
cause of the
high.
pregnancy is the condom broke. I'm saying the cause of the pregnancy is they had sex.
Yes, exactly.
That's what this boils down to.
Yes, exactly. And where the responsibility should fall.
And I say that you had sex. It's your responsibility. And you
Right.
say the condom broke. It's the condom company's responsibility. I say it's not the condom
Well,
company's
not necessarily
responsibility
the
because they
condom
already put on the
company.
box that there's a chance of this thing happening.
It's not necessarily the condom company. It could also be like the just like circumstance, right? Like in the case essentially is that like because this is where I was bringing up the insurance like case, is that there are so many things in life that are not 100%, and a lot of stuff that occurs like 0.01 like percent of the time is bad for you. For
Hmm.
me, it feels wrong to say that that sort of like consideration should be applied across the board for
Why does it
responsibility.
not feel wrong to tell people that they should understand the risks of the behavior they're engaging in?
I think they should understand the risks of the behavior that they're engaging in. But I think that if you understand that the risk is like 0.01% chance that this thing breaks, and you like
Hmm.
approach the usage correctly, and you're like being responsible in every other situation, like it sounds like the only thing in this hypothetical that we're like in disagreement about is like the condom itself breaking. Um, that to me is sufficient amount of consideration placed where the I would say that the couple has put in sufficient work to be considered responsible, and because of that, the breaking of the condom, for me at least, shouldn't be placed as responsibility on the couple.
Let's. I don't want to go like super anecdotal here, but let's do it anyway.
Okay.
So when I was a kid, and by that I mean like 16 to 20 or so probably, I engaged in a copious amount of of reproductive behavior that was not intended to actually to cause insemination, right? And as a result, I used lots of condoms, and I was doing all of this with the knowledge in my mind that I needed to be extremely careful. I needed to follow the directions on the box and on the wrapper. I knew that I should pull out anyway, just in case, because shit happens. As much as it is much more satisfying to not do things the way I was doing them, I did them anyway because I understood that if I made a mistake or if these protective measures failed, then I would be in a position to be a parent before I was ready to be, or I would be in a position where a girl was going to be killing something that was 50% my genetic material. So
Sure.
I did everything I could to make sure that what I was doing was as least likely, or was as catered to uh, moving things against that consequence occurring. But I
Yeah.
still did it knowing that there was some odd percentage chance of it happening, and through fortune or otherwise, I was never in a position where I had to be a young father or or stand by and watch somebody kill my baby.
Right. And if somehow one of the girls that you were intimate with got pregnant, I would say personally it would not be your responsibility in the case where, say, for example, she decided to go get an abortion. But it sounds like to me what you would say is you would be responsible for that, and you would try
Yeah.
very hard to stop her from getting an abortion.
No, I wouldn't. To
Oh,
be
okay.
honest with you, I
Fair.
would I would have told her that I didn't want her to do it. I would have asked her not to. If she was willing to sit down and have a conversation about it, I would have. When I was young, I obviously I was not very articulate, but I was very emotional, and I very much value life, and I very much think that uh, you know, I wouldn't go so far as to say eggs and sperm are life. I think cells are like a component of life, but I don't think they are life themselves. I think, yeah, you're the scientist here, but I,
Not in
if,
biology.
If I'm not mistaken, though, we would not. I don't think there's any definition of life that says a cell is like is life itself. We wouldn't say a cell is life, would we? We would say we might say it's alive on some definitions. We wouldn't call it a life.
So that could just be like a syntactic difference.
It is, of course. That's why I'm trying to make the distinction.
If just to make sure I'm like clearly understanding you, when you say a life, this it seems like you're meaning something that like would describe specifically like human life, like let's say like I have a life and you have a life, and there's a distinction between, and maybe the description is not like super clear, but there's some distinction between, like, say for example us and I don't know, like a tree or blade of grass or something, right?
I think a tree is alive, but I don't think a leaf is alive. I'm sorry,
Okay.
a life, not alive. A leaf is alive so long as it's being sustained, right? I think a fetus is a life. I do not think a zygote is a life.
Sure. I guess like, okay, this is kind of moving, I feel like, more into the standard, like the standard discussion material with you know, the where do we draw the line for human life part.
We don't have to go there. I'm trying to tell you where
Oh, I'm happy to go there. I just wanted to
am in
make
the
sure
gray
we
area. Yeah.
yeah, like I'm happy to go here. I'm just trying to make sure that we like it sounds like, unless you have like a significantly different or novel idea in terms of how to argue the gap between like where we are drawing the responsibility allocation. It sounds like, you know, that's kind of like an impasse, and I'm not really, I personally, so I'm not really seeing how to bridge that. So if
I don't think we
we're-
can, and I don't think we have to.
Sure, okay.
So really what it all boils down to me is what society, which direction society moves in, because where we are now and where we have been for our lifetimes is kind of teetering over the line where you and I are at. We're neither of us have like, I don't think, extreme positions. You're obviously not advocating for the standard pro-choice argument, and I'm obviously not advocating for the standard pro-life argument. I just tend to think that I'm leaning way harder into the pro-life side of things, and you're leaning way harder into the pro-choice side of things as a consequence of this little line of nuance.
I actually am not super sure of that, because you said something that I was going to bring up later in terms of like prescription, because it sounded like you were really interested in like how to move society, and I did think through this a little bit. So on the idea of like pro-life as a service, you know, I mentioned this sort of analogy with, say, gun ownership, right? Guns are, you're able to purchase a gun, you're able to, you know, go to a shooting range and execute like the mechanics of a gun.
Sure.
And the arbitration on whether or not a specific usage of a gun is considered moral is kind of done like post the usage of the gun. And I'll be, for my position at least, and what I said earlier about like, I think, you know, abortion as a service, but not as culture, is something that I would be in favor of. This would, I think, imply a system that's actually pretty similar to what you're saying, like prescriptively speaking, because I think, say for example, if you legalize abortion as a service, maybe at hospitals you're able to get an abortion, but there is significant moral arbitration after, or you would have to get some sort of arbitration beforehand to get an abortion. That this, like, I wouldn't be against this, like if there was legislation that would control this type of activity.
We already make a distinction between things that are premeditated and things that are done as an act of passion, right?
Yes.
And I don't think anybody has abortion as an act of passion. I think that people choose to have abortions.
But it's possible that an abortion has to occur in a like split, maybe minute, not a split second, but a split minute decision.
Sure, and if you're talking about like a medical emergency, this is something that I don't think there's a single pro-life person on the face of the earth who, if explained that there are times when an abortion is like a component of a life-saving procedure, that would have any justification for arguing against it, and I don't think most of them would. I think a lot of people would have a quick emotional reaction like, yeah, but that's a baby. And it's like, well, what if the mom's literally gonna, but it's a baby. Okay, whatever. Like you can't argue with them, but also there's not enough of them to even be something really worth talking about in this conversation, as far as I'm concerned. I don't think that is. I don't think that those procedures are a component of the broader abortion culture conversation. I guess is my point.
Sure, yeah. I mean, the only like maybe subtlety there, and I agree with you completely on this. The only like subtlety there is, um, for people who are still against abortion in cases like that. You could ask like the questions like, so why are you still against abortion? Like, well, it would naturally turn into a life, or you let the thing play out, and then a bunch of weird questions about like, say, I don't know, like cloning cells and stuff like this, implying life, like that. Those sort of hypotheticals could come out. But yeah, like I'm pretty much in agreement with you here, which is that like the emergency cases are very similar, I would say, to like probably like the Kyle Rittenhouse situation was a good example, like a good recent example of this, where he killed somebody, and this was like there was no like premeditation. He had to do it in self-defense at that moment, and that was what was, at least legally judged to be the case. This would be, I guess, similar in nature to, say, an abortion occurring where there's a medical emergency and pretty much nobody is like against that. If we take that off the table, the other cases, say for example, you are talking about a person that got raped and got impregnated through rape. A person like this, I still believe that if abortion was like a legal service, that there should be some steps taken just to make sure that carrying out an abortion in that situation, is done systematically, so that the like in a case where, say for example, if you don't have this sort of legislation, somebody could say, somebody raped me when they didn't get raped, make a false accusation, for example, and then try to get an abortion through this sort of means. And of course, that would probably be something you wouldn't want in your system, right? So
I totally agree with you, and I think that that's an important thing to bring up. So I forget which state it is. If I'm not mistaken, don't quote me on this, or you can if you want to. I'm pretty sure it's Mississippi. There's one state where abortion is like heavily restricted. It can be done in cases of rape, but in order to do that, you have to qualify it. You have to actually charge somebody with rape, or you have to like press charges, I guess. I think that's the right way to go. I think rapes are massively underreported. I mean, they obviously are. Every study that's ever been done on this shows that like a sliver of rapes are reported. Rapists should be in prison or worse, as far as I'm concerned. I think that if someone is pregnant as a consequence of rape, I think that I still cannot bring myself to advocate for them having abortions, but I would advocate for the right to do so, to make that choice for themselves. And I think that if they want to make that choice, they're welcome to do so. I would not. I don't think they're doing something wrong, frankly. But I do think that if that is your justification for getting a rape, I think you should also do the other right thing, and that is get the rapist off the streets, and you should press charges against them.
yeah, sure. I mean, part of that is also on the responsibility of the state, since I think in most places, rape is like highly illegal. But
Yeah.
the I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that, like, I think in terms of like actual prescription of what would happen, it sounds like our ideas are really similar, actually. And the only caveat between probably the two prescriptions that we would maybe want to see come to existence, in the United States, or I'm not super aware of like other countries outside of the U.S., but like, say for example in the United States, the only difference would probably be where the like line of responsibility would allow for, say, a legal abortion to take place. And for me, for example, I gave one example about the condom breaking, that, if you had in good faith, basically acted with responsibility in engaging in sex, and still somehow, your partner got pregnant, or you got pregnant, then for me, I think that, say, in legislation, that couple should be allowed to reserve an abortion, for example, and not have to like be considered like immoral in doing so.
So in this circumstance, who are you placing the blame on, or who's shouldering the responsibility of the actions of all the parties involved here?
Oh, physics.
Physics.
Yeah, because it's just like reality, right? Like, for example, like if you drive your car down the road, an accident could occur inside of your car. I mean, like Tesla's, for example, had there was this what was it,
The
I think it was like
self-driving thing, right?
or like the battery was there was some sort of thing wrong with the Teslas, right? And a bunch of people could have gone into accidents. I don't think that putting the responsibility on the person who's driving the Tesla like every morning, for me, I feel like it's a bit too much to expect. And this is what I meant earlier when I said like it feels like maybe pragmatically unrealistic for that sort of consideration to be occurring at every junction where such a highly like you're otherwise taking all the like steps to be responsible. You put your seatbelt on, you have like a working airbag system, you've done your every 6 months you're taking your car into a check, and all this stuff is done that's proper, your seats are like properly nailed down. And in the case where, like, say for example, the battery does something, or the self-driving car or whatever does something, right, and then you cause an accident, for example, and this accident could even
I
result
think
in
this is
something.
really disanalogous, to be honest. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I don't think this is. I think this is really disanalogous, because you're talking about a system which has hundreds of components that have all sorts of different fail conditions. They interact with each other in extremely complicated and elaborate ways, and you can have something fail that is quite sincerely beyond your control, or you don't go into it understanding the risks, right?
I think you do, though, right? Like most people that, at least for me, I don't know, like maybe people who aren't as like cognizant of their like car's functions. I at least try to be pretty cognizant when I take my car in for checkups and stuff, like what's going on, and I try to know like where the primary sources of error, I guess is the right way to say it, as my car ages. Like an example
But
is
you don't advocate for others doing the same thing you're doing.
I do. I think that like, or sorry, you're right. I don't advocate for that in context of abortion. I think that it's good culturally to advocate for this. This is kind of again what I mean by like, I think abortion shouldn't be like pushed as a fail-safe like contraception method. I agree with you on that. But even though I know where my car might fail, and I'm aware of this on like a daily basis, I don't think, for example, if I were to get into my car, and in terms of the disanalogousness, it's maybe arguable that reproduction is also pretty complicated. There's a bunch of stuff that's going on there. Maybe I don't understand that well, but I could try to come up with a.
But you
simpler...
don't have to have sex. You don't have to have non-reproductive sex. It's
you
not.
Also don't have
need.
to drive a car, though, right?
Well, for a lot of people, they actually do. In order to get from the place they live to the place where they make money, which they need to live.
But does that have to, or is that like I guess this is that have to up to the moral consideration of something equivalent to, say, abortion? Maybe that's the right way to say this. So suppose
again, I think it's a bad analogy, but to go there with you, I would say that you're engaging in a we'll go ahead and call it an optional behavior. We'll say you're engaging in the optional behavior of purchasing or renting or leasing or borrowing a vehicle in order to get yourself to the place where you work and get back home and go see your friends and do all these other things. And if something happens as a consequence of that is quite sincerely beyond your control, outside of your ability to have prepared for or done something to mitigate the risks involved, then depending on the actual thing that happened, like did you have a tire blowout? Okay, I think that's different than like an engine failure necessarily, because you see the tires on the on the car, they're there. You can easily look at the state they're in before you get in the vehicle. You can easily know that over time the state of the tires are degrading, and the risk of something happening to the tires increases exponentially as the tread wears down. So if you have a brand new tires and a tire blows out, then I'm not blaming you for that happening. I'm blaming, the tire company for creating a faulty product, or I'm blaming the person who installed it for doing something fucky that made the thing fall apart, or I'm blaming, whatever random thing that was on the road that you hit.
It's just
But if your
circumstance, yeah.
but if your tires are bald and you run over a rock and the thing explodes, then I think that's pretty much on you at that point. So,
I agree.
and that's just one component of the vehicle. And there's all these other components, like the engine. Were you paying attention to making sure that you were changing the oil on time? Did you have enough antifreeze in the car? Is there all this other stuff? Like, yeah, you should be monitoring all these things. You should be taking care of all these things. But it's also possible that you don't pop the hood and look under there as much as someone who's like a mechanic who owns a car might do. He might be super in tune with every last little knock and rattle that happens, and some little weird thing happens. That's not my car. She doesn't make that noise. That's complicated, right?
No, I agree. So like we could reframe.
Not fucking people is not complicated.
we
If you're not
can
ready to have
reframe the
kids, don't
analogy.
fuck people.
Sure, but we can reframe the analogy to just the tires part, or it could be a bike. It doesn't have to necessarily be a car. I just used car because that was the first thing that came to mind. But like it could be just the tire example, right? Like, let's say I do as much as I like realistically can on like a day-to-day basis to make sure that my car's tires are in good condition. It is still possible, there's like a 0.001% chance or whatever, that I'm driving down the street and there's a nail on the road. This actually literally happened to me like 2 years ago. And the tire explodes, and I luckily didn't get into an accident, but somebody less fortunate might get into an accident. This happened to me on the freeway, actually. And you cause an accident that could lead to something that's like, incredibly damaging to somebody else. For example, somebody else could lose their life. A huge amount of stuff could happen in a car accident in this sort of case. In that situation, that nuance, for me, I would personally say I wouldn't hold the person who's driving the, car that had the tire that accidentally exploded on this on the freeway or whatever. I wouldn't hold that person morally responsible. And I think
But you don't have to, because they have insurance.
well, no, like, I mean, it's not just an issue of insurance, right? I mean, like, morally speaking, I wouldn't hold them responsible. Even if, for example, they like caused a loss in life in say some other person that was driving on the freeway with them. And I think that this same type of nuance in terms of analyzing the responsibility of, say, two people that are engaging in sex would be, I would apply that same nuance there, because, for example, with the condom example, the likelihood of a condom failing if you're using it correctly and you're taking all your like safe, like responsible measures, and you're not, some people are really interested in maybe very, very rigorous sex or something that goes beyond the sensible limits of the tools they're using.
You just said it yourself. It's not sensible. Like, why are we granting them moral consideration?
Well, no, like, so if they're not being sensible, like, let's say, I don't know, like a couple decides they want to, have sex, like hanging upside down on bungee cords on a bridge or something like this, right? I would probably say if the condom broke and you got pregnant in that case, not probably, I would definitely say if the condom broke and, you got pregnant in that case, that's your responsibility. I would not grant them moral consideration for getting an abortion. Absolutely not. But
it's just like the rape thing. How could you know whether or not they were engaging in like fucking missionary sex or something?
Well, so this is part of it, right? This is part of the arbitration process that I would, for me at least, I would be okay with. If, for example, you had to go through a process of like proving that you had engaged in what I would call casual sex, and I understand like you don't believe in this, but
How would you have them prove this? Is everybody supposed to start recording their sex like with dash cams or something?
No, no, you could like, for example, bring the broken condom. This is like something that would be pretty good evidence as to like what caused the break or what caused the tear.
You could break a condom post hoc and just say like you could just have sex without a condom and then just pop a condom afterward and go to the doctor and be like, you know, like.
Yeah, that's true. So, okay, maybe like the actual implementation of this policy, I'm not like 100% sure on, but I would still like from a moral perspective, not, I would still not hold them accountable. Like if they were being like in good faith and this is like true, like again, maybe I'll need to think a little bit about how to implement something like this. But from a moral perspective, which is what I think we're arguing about right now, I would say responsibility wouldn't fall on those people because they had, like the truth of it is that they had actually like done everything they could to be safe before engaging in casual sex.
I just don't think there's any way that we can verify that. And I don't think that we should have any expectation of people telling us the truth when it is in their best interest not to.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, like, so in a very draconian system, right? Like, you could, I guess, like implement a video, like, like maybe that would be the thing to do. Like, you'd
But why
implement some
would
sort
we
of
want a
video system.
draconian system?
You don't. I'm not saying like you want to implement the system. I'm saying it is possible to have sorry, there's somebody sent a message on my chat. It's possible to have a system that might work, and yeah, I'm not convinced there's necessarily no solution that would be reasonable. I'd have to think about it a little bit more first.
Yeah, just to put a bow on it, I would say that I sincerely, and somebody in my chat mentioned this earlier. As much as I understand why people think Plan B is murder, I don't. I have absolutely no issue with Plan B at all. I think that if there's going to be a backstop against these sort of things, I think if the condom broke, and I think that in modern society, the thing that makes the most sense to do is to go down to the drugstore and get some Plan B. I do not think the thing to do is to sit around and wait to see if a fetus develops and then go get an abortion. I think these are two dramatically different things. And if somebody wants to have I don't like the term chemical abortion. That's what some people call Plan B. Even if you want to call it that, it still is not enough to like morally repulse me to the notion.
Isn't Plan B supposed to occur before fertilization though? In which case, like,
No, that's why it's called Plan B. It's like your backup plan. It's like, oops, you fucked up. Go get your Plan B. That's not actually what it's called on the box.
Right,
It's
but the way I
colloquial
understand the function of Plan B is that it's supposed to block the sperm from actually like fertilizing the egg, not that it like kills the fertilized egg. So
I don't know the mechanics by which it works, but I do know that it is meant to be used after.
yeah, yeah,
After
like
you have.
if you're scared that you know, like let's say the condom broke or something, then you would try and get Plan B. So maybe you know, in the case where the mechanism is that it like somehow chemically kills the fertilized egg, then okay, I think I see what you're saying. I think
My understanding is that basically it forces menstruation, but I could be wrong on that. That's how I've just understood it.
yeah, maybe I'm like, yeah, maybe we need like a biology expert or a Plan B expert to come in here. I think like I would also like, here's maybe another layer of checks that you could add for like responsibility here. I'd say like, you know, using Plan B in the case where, you know, maybe it isn't chemical abortion, that would probably be a necessity in terms of checking that like a couple had taken the proper steps to engage responsibly in casual sex.
So yeah, maybe Plan B is the thing that smooths out the wrinkle between us here.
Yeah, maybe, but I think the key difference that we have is like is actually where we place responsibility. It sounds like, and I can see why you would place responsibility, especially in the case of abortion, where you do. There's a lot of spam in my chat for some reason of like a bot, I think. This is pretty interesting.
Engagement's engagement. That moves you up in the algorithm, man.
Oh, great.
I love bots.
And I think I think that I can understand like why you put the line where you draw the line where you draw the line. I would ask you the following, actually. Here's a hypothetical I thought about.
Sure.
Do you believe, so this is kind of similar to my position with the transgender stuff, which is about distinguishability, or like this, like, if a forest or if a tree falls in the forest and it doesn't make a sound, did it actually fall? Do you believe that, how do I phrase this? So if it's undistinguishable whether or not, if it's undistinguishable whether or not your wife got pregnant or your girlfriend got pregnant, would it be morally wrong for her to engage in actions that would reduce the risk of getting pregnant?
Can you say that one more time?
Yeah, sure. So if it's indistinguishable, like let's say between, like, so let's say you have sex, right? And you don't use a condom. And maybe this is like in a case where you're actually trying to have a kid. After having sex, it's not 100%, right? There's a bunch of people actually that struggle with this even, where after having sex, it's not super clear that your partner has become pregnant. Let's say during that period of time, she, like, I don't know, she's going to like extreme degrees, even potentially to like self-harm or, consumption of alcohol or doing some like sort of crazy things that would endanger a potential, not, you don't know if it is a fertilized egg or not, but a potential zygote, I guess. Would you consider those types of behaviors immoral?
The things that the wife is doing?
Yeah, like let's say, for example, your wife, I don't know, for some reason, okay.
Oh, you don't have to tell. If you're asking me what she's doing, is that immoral? Like, yeah.
So why would you consider it immoral?
Because she is trying to kill something that's inside of her.
But you don't know if it's inside of her. That's the thing.
I thought she did, though.
No, she doesn't know. Like, nobody knows, right? There's a period between, like, you ejaculate in your girlfriend or wife, or whatever partner, and actually being able to detect whether or not she's become pregnant.
Okay, so let's we don't even need to have the pregnancy be a consideration here. Like, and I don't want to completely change the subject, but if you're asking if self-harm is immoral, then yes. If you're asking if becoming like heavily inebriated is immoral, and I would say yes to that as well.
Okay, so, but you wouldn't place it in the same like class of moral consideration as, like, for example, an abortion, right?
The inebriation, no. Well, honestly, you know what? Actually, yeah, I'm going to bite the bullet on this. Yeah, I will. I will say that when you become inebriated, you are absolving yourself of your moral agency. Therefore, the things you do when you are inebriated, whether you would have done them when you're sober or not, you chose to put yourself in a position to abandon your ethics and your morals. Therefore, yeah, I think it's abhorrent. I do.
Okay, sure. Yeah, if you're willing to bite the bullet there, then like there's really nothing I can say here.
It's like when people like to use the term victim blame to distract from the reality that if you get inebriated and you do so around people you don't know, around people you don't trust, or around other inebriated people, bad shit can happen. Shit that you would never ever want to happen to you happen as a consequence of you taking yourself out of your agency. If you're absolving yourself of your ability to control yourself and to keep yourself out of bad situations. So yeah, I'll bite the bullet on that all the way.
Sure, yeah, and especially I guess like in this case, like because the alcohol like could potentially poison a possible fetus or possible zygote. Like yeah, there's more.
I don't even think you have to go that deep on it, honestly.
Sure.
But I mean, if you wanted, if you would say that, like, if she knew that she might be pregnant, or she considered that she might be pregnant, and then as a result of becoming intoxicated, lost the baby, then I would say absolutely she killed the baby.
I guess like the point here is that you can't tell, right? So you would never know whether or not the baby was lost because you don't know if the baby existed in the first place.
Yeah, but you're already. But I mean, I guess that's why I'm making the distinction here to say that like you still were engaging in immoral behavior, and as a
Hmm.
consequence of that immoral behavior, this behavior that has caused you to basically give up your ability to control yourself, you've ended
Yeah,
a
it's like
life.
on equal like moral grounds, I guess. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, okay. Another sort of like before if like I don't know if you have any other stuff or you want to wrap up this topic soon.
Yeah, I'm happy ending it there unless you have anything else.
Yeah, I just had a couple of things here. I guess like if you want to touch on the like drawing the line for like human life consideration, this is the I feel like this is the part that's kind of I don't know if you have any like unique takes on this part. For me, what I've heard at least on the pro life side is that the argument is essentially human life and one that has done nothing wrong like essentially shouldn't be killed, and then the counter argument is essentially, well, where is human life, like where do you establish that? And then the counter argument is like, well, then give me a description of human life. And so if you have something like unique to add here,
I think this argument is a red herring because I don't think there's I don't think anybody on any side of this argument from any direction has like an actual I don't think there is a place where you can draw the line. And even if you could, there would still be that like that bimodal place between the point where it is and the point where it isn't, where there's that gray area where we would still have an argument. Like even if we said that if we make a distinction between a zygote and a fetus, there's still a transitional period where it's both at the same time, right? Or it's neither for a split second. So there's always that flux state, or there's always that buffer area where we would then have to keep diving down, and we would wind up at a stalemate. So I find that argument to be really boring.
sure, okay. Yeah, I'm pretty much in agreement. Is that it's like it's really hard to argue, and usually like the end result is essentially like you have to perform some sort of experiment that's like you just really can't like tractably perform the experiment. So
Yeah.
okay, cool. Yeah, I have pretty much nothing else unless you want to talk about the fathers.
Yeah, well, I think the father bears an equivalent moral responsibility in terms of not doing what you can to mitigate the risk of creating a pregnancy. I think that he also bears equal responsibility in terms of ending a pregnancy if need be, or not if need be, rather if that's the route that is chosen. So. And I believe that the autonomy point is still really important here. I think that if a man rapes a woman, then I believe that the pregnancy is 100% his responsibility. And similarly, if a woman rapes a man and becomes pregnant, the pregnancy is 100% her responsibility.
Sure. So let me give you like some of the hypotheticals that are maybe a little bit more in the gray area.
Hmm.
Let's say you have a situation where an abortion we like both would agree is like morally could take place.
Hmm.
Let's suppose that the father wants to have the abortion, but the mother does not want to have the abortion. What should happen for you?
Um, I'm not sure if the only circumstance where this would actually come into play in my model is if there's a medical emergency where like the woman is incapacitated and a doctor comes and says like, hey, she's on the table, there was a complication, we either have to abort the pregnancy or there's like a high chance that she'll die, and that's when the father, I would say, has to make the decision, right? And I think that whatever decision he chooses to make, this will probably vary by state, I believe, in terms of what's legal. But I believe that I believe that that's a decision for him to make, and I think that whatever decision he makes um, could be justified. I can't imagine a scenario in which I would say, "Bro, you fucked up. You shouldn't have done what you did." You know, if you value the life of, and there's so much nuance there. It's really hard to dive into all of it. But if he values the life of the baby, and you know that's what he chooses to do, then you know, and how far along was the pregnancy? If she passes, will the baby still survive? If so, then
Let's say like in this situation, it's not an emergency. It's still
hmm
somehow like, you know, I'm like, let's just like abstract away that part. I'm not gonna try and like formulate something like on the spot here. But let's say it's morally, like we both agree, like, okay, this is a situation where morally like it's okay for them to have an abortion, and
hmm
somehow or there's no like emergency, neither person is at risk, the child's not at risk.
nobody's been raped.
Yeah, nobody's been raped. It's just
Well, then I would say there's no moral. Then there's nothing else to consider here. If there's not a medical emergency and nobody's been raped, then I don't think there should be an abortion.
you
Period.
shouldn't. Okay, so the mother's like opinion would win over,
No, I would say they shouldn't be able to have an abortion.
which is like in agreement with what the mother is saying. She like you just mean like in absolution, like you would say there's
Yeah.
no abortion, even though.
No, no medical necessity for the abortion in
Oh,
terms of.
wait, sorry. Like, let me try to repeat the hypothetical. So, in this case, we somehow both agree that an
Mhm.
abortion is morally sensible. I don't have an exact like thing on the top of my head right now to be able to like exemplify this, but just pretend like this is okay, right? The thing I'm trying to get at is like, how do you wager the like father's input in terms of the decision of an abortion, given that it is morally allowed and the
So
situation
I
isn't an
see what you're
emergency?
saying, but this is a line of argumentation that I just find really uninteresting, and I'm not really willing to engage with it because I believe that we're talking about scenarios that I don't want to happen in the first place.
Sure.
Scenarios wherein I think a huge part of what's wrong with our society right now is we're exploring hypotheticals that shouldn't even exist. Like, is rape play okay? If I'm choking my girlfriend during sex and she dies, is it my fault? And like things like, we shouldn't be choking people during sex. We shouldn't be rape playing. Okay, like so I don't care the things that occur after this as a consequence. They're not interesting to me because you shouldn't be fucking choking people.
So I think like I think that might be a little bit too uncharitable because I don't know. I don't think you know where I'm going with this yet. The
But
second
but
case I
you're
think is,
exploring hypotheticals that I don't want to exist.
or we haven't finished exploring it, which is I think the issue
I
here.
think we have because there's not been a rape. Because if there's a rape, then I
Oh
don't give a
hold
fuck
on.
what the
Let me
father
just
thinks.
finish my example. You'll see why. Okay. So
Okay.
let's say in in that situation, like it's like no for the it's just like no overall, and like we just don't consider this case. So if you flip it,
Mm-hmm.
if the birth father says no, but the mother says yes, now what do you think?
What circumstance does this happen? Because again, I don't think abortion is something that should be on the table if there hasn't been a medical emergency, in which case I described my position on that, or a rape, in which case I've described my position on that.
Yeah, like okay, in the case, okay, let's say for example that there was a rape that occurred in this situation.
Hmm. Then I don't give a fuck what the father thinks.
So okay, so if the mother wants to have the child after the rape has occurred, you
He
would.
should have thought about that before he raped her.
Okay, what would the responsibility be on the father in this case?
None. He's in
None?
jail or dead.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So, how about this? In a case where, what if the qualification for rape is like not clear? Like there is significant question about whether or not a rape had occurred.
Okay, so this is why I say she has to press charges in order to be able to have an abortion justified by
No, she
having been
doesn't want to
raped.
have an abortion in this case.
Hmm.
The thing I'm trying to figure out is like, so do you believe like the father's in like how much do you believe the father's input should matter in this case, right? Like in the situation where like in modern society, a father is responsible after let's say like you get
Okay,
divorced
so
or
you,
something like this.
I think I misunderstood you.
Hmm.
You're saying if she doesn't want to have an abortion.
She
So we're
does
not talking about
not want to
abortion
have an
anymore.
abortion.
We're talking about like parental responsibility.
Yes, and the father does want to have an abortion.
Uh-huh.
Do you
Well, that
listen?
sucks because he can't in my model.
Right. And so in this case, like let's say the mother like goes and has a child, and now the father is given, all of the like childcare and or, all the the huge like baggage of whatever companies like the like these sort of cases, oftentimes like with complete disregard for the actual father's means.
Hmm.
Like, do you still think that in this sort of situation the father should have like no input?
So I'm completely morally and logically consistent here.
Hmm.
These are things you think about before you have sex. Now that you've had sex, now that you've created a life, it's on you, man. Like it's on you. You did the thing, you pay for the thing.
Okay. So you're saying, let me just like make sure I understand properly. So in this situation, the even in the situation where, okay. So even in the situation where I'm trying to think if there's some way that like the father could be absolved of responsibility of engaging in sex in the first place.
But if she raped him,
Yeah, or like what if they were both like really intoxicated, but you said earlier that that's like on the same level as like as immoral as an abortion. So, yeah, okay.
absolutely, yeah, 1000%. And this is why.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Okay, so essentially like the father will always be responsible and okay.
Yeah, he's always 50% responsible, and except in circumstances where she can't be.
Yeah, sure. And I guess like in this case, like let's say she like raped him and he had a child, or sorry, she decided to continue with the child. In this case, would you side with the father?
I would say that he should press charges against her, and
Hmm.
I believe firmly, and this will never happen. By the way, I don't I won't even advocate for this because this will never happen. But I believe that in this circumstance, he should actually be able to, as a part of pressing charges, assert that that if he wants this, then he should be able to force her to have an abortion legally. The same thing as like getting a restraining order, effectively.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
interesting. Gotcha. Okay. So in that case, like you would actually like, and the reason here is like not actually because of the responsibility placed on the father, but actually because of like his
His
like as
autonomy was
his
taken from
autonomy. Yeah,
him.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, for that then I'm actually this is like literally exactly what I wrote down. So I think we're pretty in agreement on this one.
Cool. Yeah, that's like big brain libertarian, never going to happen kind of thing. But that would be wonderful if we wanted to be consistent as a society. That's what we would do, but we don't, so we won't.
Sure.
Yeah. If you think of anything else, man, I find this type of conversation to be really fun. So, you
I
know,
have one for the abortion one. I just thought of this. Like, actually, I thought of it like when we started this, but I didn't want to like interrupt. Do you want to hear the
let's do it, man. I'm down.
Okay, so here's a case where you might have like abortion morality like on the table. Suppose a couple went to a bar and they like, I don't know, they went to get food. Somebody drugs both of them and now they're like intoxicated, and then they engage in like sexual intercourse when they're intoxicated, not by their own fault. And then now they go to like a clinic, right? So in the case where both of them agree in having an abortion, or both of them decide not to have an abortion, like it's very clear. But in the case, like for example, where like the father says yes and the mother says no, or the father says no and the mother says yes, how would you go about navigating this?
Okay, so yeah, so just to be clear for anyone who missed the beginning part or whatever, so we're basically negating my ability to pin this on the person who consented to
Hmm.
it, to creating this, because it would be the guy who drugged them or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I would say that because they were drugged, they became impregnated outside of their control effectively, then it is
then they need to press charges against that guy because he's a fucking monster. And they now have what I would consider to be a legal right to have an abortion if they chose to do so. So now the question is, if the mother doesn't want to and the father does want to,
and
should he be able to compel her to? Okay, so I would say, yeah, that actually is complicated. This is a great hypothetical. I hate to say this. I really absolutely hate to say this. I think I actually have to regress here. I have to actually go stupid for a second because I don't know how else to make this decision. I think I actually have to say her body, her choice.
Interesting. That's really interesting. Okay.
I think because I think fundamentally at this point, the person who created the pregnancy can't actually be held responsible for it outside of being like held legally accountable. And the fetus is basically the creation of these two people, the mother and the father. It's both of theirs, and it was neither of their faults. It was neither of their ideas. I don't think. I think that if the father feels he has the right to say that it needs to not exist because I didn't consent to it, I think he has a valid claim. I also think that if she says that it's half mine and I want to keep it, she has a valid claim, and vice versa. But at the end of the day, you can't have half a baby. You can't.
True.
The stalemate results in abortion, right? So
does it necessarily though? Like, so what if it's the opposite? If the father says no and the mother wants to have the child, or sorry, the father says I want an abortion and the mother says no, I want to have the child. Would you still say like her body, her choice?
I do, yeah. And I say that because otherwise there's a stalemate, and otherwise, like there's a legal stalemate, I guess is what I'm saying, or even
what
a moral
if they're not
stalemate.
married though? What if this is like let's say they're like pre-marriage and the father like clearly does not have either like the financial means or like I don't know the emotional capacity or whatever to take care of a child.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well then he shouldn't have to, and it's her choice whether she wants to have the baby, despite the fact that he's not going to be financially contributing.
Oh man, that is that is very spicy. Okay,
yeah,
okay, that's interesting. So if in this sort of situation, the mother,
her life, her choice. How about that? It's not her body. It's about her life. It's about whether she wants to deal with the downstream consequences of having the baby.
Gotcha. So you wouldn't. So this would be like super. Like this would be super like men's right almost, like, because in this sort of situation then you wouldn't support if the father wanted the abortion but the mother said no, she has the child, you wouldn't support say like the court system saying like, hey, you have to pay child support, like, you know, you have to pay like whatever percentage of your meager income to child support. You wouldn't support that?
Absolutely not, because he didn't consent to it.
Okay. Whew.
Like consent, autonomy. These are things I care about. Genders, I could give a flapping fuck less. I really don't. I think the only thing more cringe to me than feminism is men's rights. I think they're equally brain dead. I hate this stuff.
The counter argument is that like the child did nothing wrong, and the like capacity for the mother to like raise the child by herself might be significantly reduced in comparison to if the court forced the father to like pay some amount of dues or something like this. So the value here, I guess, is more so placed on the child due to the child's, you know, in this case, all three of them don't really have any autonomy, but
right. Well, we're giving them autonomy by being able to choose how they move forward from where they are currently at.
Right, but the consideration for the quality of life for the child, I guess this is where it becomes tricky, because I think in society we tend to value the well-being of children over the well-being of adults, and I think this might even actually be the moral basis behind a lot of the family court law stuff, where they kind of just screw over.
I don't think that's actually true, but I see why you feel that way. I think we it feels like we value the well-being of children more than adults, but in reality, I think it's that we respect that they don't have control over their own well-being.
Yeah, or they're incapable of making like decisions with a full understanding of what's going on. Yeah.
So let me. You're gonna hate this, so I have to do it anyway.
Go ahead.
That being said, why would we entertain a child telling us that they believe that they are the other gender?